What are we talking about? Practice? We're talking about practice, man.
This is UnCleated with Garrett, Gibbs, and Jason Bishop.
In my opinion, that sucked.
We failed to make our coaching points and our points more compelling than their fat little girlfriend.
Oh my God, did he really just say that?
And we are off, UnCleated, right here at the SouthernSportsEdition.com. Jason Bishop along with Garrett Gibbs. Alabama, A&M, Tennessee, Oregon. We're going to give our picks for the Heisman Trophy. Along for the ride, my partner in crime, Garrett Gibbs.
Well, week 3 of the college football season got underway. We had some pretty key matchups.
Alabama, Texas A&M.
I think the biggest one we need to talk about is the Alabama-Texas A&M game. Alabama going in 8.5-point favorites over the Aggies. I think a lot of people initially thought that was somewhat of a long shot to be 8.5-point favorites on the road with Johnny Manziel coming off a Heisman Trophy season. But the Tide came in and got it done.
They did. You know, the thing that was most impressive, I think, about Alabama, and don't get me wrong, I have been on Alabama since the season has started. I don't think they're as good as advertised, but they showed a lot of character in the A&M game. The thing that impresses me the most is at the end of the game when Texas A&M started to make their push to get themselves back in the game, maybe even pull out the upset. Alabama did what they had to do to win the football game. They had to score touchdowns, had to put together drives, and hats off to them, to the offense and to A.J. McCarron. They did what they needed to do to win.
In my personal opinion, I think A.J. McCarron is definitely the most underrated quarterback for a big program in the country. If you take it, you just single out what he did yesterday, guy just wins football games. He takes care of the football. I think he was something like 20 for 29. 334 yards, which was a career high, might I add. So the guy just wins. He takes care of the football. He doesn't make any mistake. The guy has 54 touchdowns in his career with 9 interceptions in his career. No other starting quarterback in the country, I believe, can say that.
No, the guy, he's done nothing but win. You know, that is what he has done at Alabama, and he has been the face of that. I guess the mainstay, the consistent face of the program and what they've been able to accomplish in his tenure there. 334 yards, 4 touchdowns, and I think the most key stat is he didn't turn the ball over. No interceptions, didn't put the ball on the ground. Whereas counterpart, do not get me wrong, Johnny Manziel is a different animal, period. There is no one in college football that even holds a candle to how talented that guy is. He almost beat Alabama once again by himself. Period. No help in the running game. He had one receiver that he consistently got the ball to, and we'll talk about his stats in a minute. But Manziel, just a completely different animal altogether.
The guy just single-handedly tried to take over the game from the first quarter, from the start of the game, and he ended up with 464 yards passing, which I believe is a career high for him. But he had 2 key interceptions. That one ended up being a pick 6 there in the third quarter, and that right there was the difference in the game. But you cannot doubt the guy's effort and skill level. The guy he is just a freak of nature. He doesn't look like much, but every week he just puts up monster numbers. I believe he had 98 yards rushing. He was the leading rusher for the whole team. Alabama pretty much just shut their rushing game down the whole time. Manziel was able to get some yards, but the rest of their backs, Alabama pretty much took away their running game, and Manziel liked to made them pay for it.
Yeah, the running totals for Texas A&M. Molina, 11 carries, 42 yards. Carson, 5 carries for 18 yards. Williams, 2 for 6. And as you mentioned, Johnny Manziel, 14 carries, 98 yards, 20-yard long run. So he was the offense. He was the focal point. If he didn't get it done, it wasn't going to get done.
Well, and I can tell you this, Jason. Alabama, their defense is definitely suspect in the passing game. I think they have one of the best rush defenses in the country. They have some of the best linebackers and it just seems like every year they just have the best linebacking core in the country. Their passing defense is a little bit suspect. We saw that big time yesterday, but I believe this started in the SEC championship last year because Georgia lit up the secondary of Alabama. Alabama wins games by ball control and offense, punishing offense. I mean, when they're averaging 6-7 yards a rush, they're just marching the chains down the field, and then they end up they don't quit. They just march it right on into the end zone, and because if you look at their possession numbers here, Alabama had the ball for 35 minutes of the game, as opposed to A&M having it for 24, almost 25. Okay, and at the first half, it was the other way around. A&M had the ball, controlled the ball pretty much for the first half. They had a lot of quick strikes. Alabama just after they went down 14-0, Alabama went back to being Alabama, controlling the ball, punishing up front, and they got the job done.
I wonder how much really Alabama punished up front, because you think about it, more so in the second half. I don't really think that was the case in the first half. Texas A&M came out in the first half and they punched Alabama right in the face. They went right at the Tide, they went right at their defense, and they went right at exactly what you just said, that secondary, which I think you're right, 100%. It's not very good. The secondary is. Sinceri is really the guy that kind of holds everything together. God forbid they lose him for any reason, because if Sinceri goes down, they're in trouble in the secondary. They can't cover. Period. They cannot cover taller, bigger, or talented receivers. Georgia exposed them, and the thing is, the secondary this year is worse than it was last year because they lost D. Milner went on to the NFL, and so they don't have an NFL caliber guy that was on the bench sitting behind T. Milner to step in.
Well, Clinton Dix yesterday. They pretty much just took him out of the game because they just didn't throw at him. Okay, he's to me, I believe he's the best in the secondary this year. And they picked on Fulton, which is a freshman. Okay, and he gave up. I believe the receiver ended up with almost 280 yards of receiving yesterday, 95-yard reception for a TD late in the game. And guess who was covering him? So Alabama's secondary definitely a suspect this year. They're really young, okay, and I see them getting better as the season goes on. But I still don't think I still think that their claim to fame, succeed this year and win games is rush defense, and their offense being their best defense by ball control and just wearing out the opposing defense.
They gave up 464 yards through the air. Let me repeat that. They gave up 464 yards through the air. Now, not all of that was on Fulton.
No.
I mean, Sinceri, he got beat a couple times too. Mike Evans, 279 yards by himself. That was on Fulton. So you can directly attribute 279 yards of passing offense on Mike Fulton, or on Fulton's plate, because he was covering Mike Evans. So 279, I'm going straight at Fulton. Other than that, the rest of that 464, I'm not a math major, wasn't a math major. I'm not even going to pretend to try and do that math for you. I'll let you break that out. That's a lot of yardage.
They can't continue to give up those kind of yards and win big games. I mean, they got LSU coming up down the schedule in another month or two. And I'm
going to say this. As talented as Johnny Manziel is, he's more of an escapability guy, scramble, make plays with his feet. And he threw for 464 yards. What in the world is Zach Mettenberger going to throw for?
Well, I'll tell you, Mettenberger's definitely made some, like I said, before, Mettenberger has definitely made strides from last year. And I think he's becoming the quarterback that everybody thought he was going to be. He reminds me of a Matt Stafford. That's who he reminds me of. He makes Sunday throws. He's only going to get better.
One thing you want to do if you're a business owner is you want to light up the market. So what you need to do if you are a business owner, you're tired of spending an arm and a leg on office supplies, I've got 3 words for you. Heron Document Systems. Heron Document Systems can offer the prices of the big box stores and give hometown customer support. Copiers, scanners, printers, toner, banners, you name it. Heron Document Systems can get it done. Give Keith and his staff a call to find out how much money they can save you. 912-267-7802. 912-267-7802 or online, HeronDS.com. HeronDS.com.
Oregon, Tennessee.
687 yards of total offense with 471 of those yards coming through the air. You know, they have that spread just figured out, and Mariota there at quarterback. I mean, he's definitely in the Heisman running. I have to say this though, Jason, that Tennessee is not the premier of the SEC like they once were. They're still trying to figure out their identity there in Knoxville. I do feel like that Oregon would struggle against an upper echelon SEC team like they did a couple of years ago when they played at LSU. I mean, LSU just wore them out, and they're bigger and they're just as fast. Okay, and I believe Alabama, LSU, even a Georgia, you know, could go toe to toe with Oregon. I believe it would be close early, but I think that the depth in the SEC is what is key. Okay, and Tennessee just struggled. They don't have much of a pass defense. And, you know, they couldn't put any pressure on the guy. He pretty much just had his way with them.
Yeah, Mariota had a big game. You know, you're talking about Tennessee struggling and not putting well, I mean, we didn't expect that. Tennessee's a young team. We knew pretty much the outcome of this game before they ever kicked it off. But one thing that jumps out at me, you know, Tennessee, they scored 2 touchdowns on that Oregon defense, but Tennessee's not very good offensively. Make no mistake about that. I know they've had a couple games against Cupcakes where they put up, you know, impressive point totals, but it's against a Cupcake. Oregon's defense gave up 316 total yards to a Tennessee offense that's not very good. Now, granted, 316 is not the end of the world, but against an offense when you're the number 2 team in the country and against a team that is where it is, like Tennessee is, rebuilding, and you give up 316 yards of offense to an offense that's not very good, not a lot of playmakers, that jumps out on the page to me. It does.
Another stat you need to look at, too, is time of possession for Oregon. They're very quick striking. That's just the way their offense is designed. Okay, their stats look a lot like the Texas A&M Alabama game. Tennessee actually had the ball for going on 35 minutes, and Oregon only had it for 25 minutes. Okay, so if you take that and you take a good team, a good running team, they might, and don't turn the ball over, they might actually beat Oregon. But you're right. I mean, Tennessee's just struggling. They're struggling to find an identity, and, you know, it clearly showed yesterday.
Yeah. Quarterback Worley, 13 for 25 for Tennessee, 126 yards, not overly impressive. Meanwhile, Marcus Mariota put the ball in the air 33 times. 4 touchdowns, 456 through the air. You were talking earlier about how you felt that Oregon wouldn't be able to compete with an upper echelon, especially what happened with LSU a couple of years ago. I'm going to say this. I watched a good bit of Oregon, Tennessee, and one thing that did stand out to me that I did take notice of is that I feel like when in the past those Oregon teams, they weren't very physical. They were fast. They could run the ball up and down the field all day long, but they could not beat you physically. One thing I noticed in this game is Oregon's offensive line. They were very physical with Tennessee's defensive line. They really were. They won that battle, and they manhandled. Now, that is something that the Oregon teams of the past have not had. Do I think that they were very physical defensively? No. It's Tennessee. But, yeah, I really don't. So I think there's still some issues there being physical on the defensive side of the ball, but one thing I did notice that I had not noticed before is how physical Oregon was in the offensive line.
But, you know, when you got an upper echelon team, you know, out of the SEC, I just feel like they would struggle with them late. Not necessarily early, but late because of the depth. You know, I feel like that Alabama has 2 complete football teams that they could put on the field every day, every week, and the depth, I don't know that Oregon does. Okay, so another stat that stands out right here is that they had 29 first downs at Oregon 29 first downs to Tennessee's 14.
Yeah.
Okay, so twice the first downs. It appears that they controlled the ball, just not time wise, and that right there, that kind of stands out to me when it gets down to crunch time, when it gets down to championship time. If you look at Alabama, like I said, I have to keep going back to them. But if you look at them, they are centered around ball control. So that keeps their defense fresh, and it keeps the opposing offense as spectators.
Marcus Mariota, of course, we talked about the 456 yards through the air. One thing that Oregon didn't do is they didn't have a back that rushed for 100 yards. Thomas rushed for 86, and that was by far and away the most. Mariota himself rushed for 27 yards. Granted, they had a ton of backs that were touching the ball. I think Thomas had only 13 carries, so he was averaging well over 6 yards a carry. But again, it stands out to me that you don't have a back that rushes for 100 yards against a Tennessee team in the SEC, which you can make an argument they're in the middle of the pack, I guess. I think for my money, I still don't see Tennessee as an average SEC team. I see them as slightly below, but I think they're on their way. Pretty good showing against an Oregon team, which everybody knew they really weren't going to win.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Oregon definitely covered the spread Saturday, and it looks like as a team, Oregon rushing, they had 41 carries for 216 as a team. Okay, well, I mean, that just tells me right there that they have a lot of different players that can rush the ball. They do have a premier back, but they take a lot of the load off of him with 3 or 4 other guys that come in different packages and run the ball, and they average 5.5 yards a carry as a team. So I mean, and have 4 TDs. So I just think that they're relatively deep, at that position where you can have the flexibility of a quarterback. Some of your receivers can actually run the ball, and they have, like I said, 3 or 4 running backs that can take some of the load off of the starting tailback.
8 total touchdowns and a field goal is what Oregon put up on the board. So, again, not taking anything away from the number 2 team in the country, they did look good against a Tennessee team that's just not very good, I think is what I'm looking at. And we expected a 59-14 score out of that game. I was more impressed that Tennessee was capable of doing what they did as far as offensive production goes. Yeah, they only scored 14 points, but I guess I feel like that the defense for Oregon is still suspect, and I want to see more physicality out of the Ducks.
And don't forget, Tennessee has a hated rivalry game coming up on Saturday against the Florida Gators, where they have to go down to Gainesville. That holds a lot more weight than this game here going forward. I think that, you could arguably say that they Oregon, then they got Florida right up next to that, and that's a big rivalry game for them guys. You could say that they were somewhat looking ahead toward Florida.
Speaking of looking ahead, if you're running a business, that's something that you constantly have to do. So business owners, you don't want to spend an arm and a leg for office supplies. Because you don't want to do that, I've got 3 words for you: Heron Document Systems. They can offer the price of the big box stores and give you hometown discounts and customer support. Copiers, scanners, printers, toner, banner, you name it, Heron Document Systems, they can get it done. Give Keith and his staff a call to find out how much money they can save you, 912-267-7802, or online at heronds.com.
Heisman Trophy.
After 3 games, the Louisville Cardinals, they struggled Saturday against, a Kentucky, which there again, it's a big rivalry game, okay? So they're expected to struggle somewhat, even though their QB didn't struggle a whole lot. I got Teddy Bridgewater, and the reason that is, he's already thrown 10 TDs in 3 games, 1,000 yards passing. He's completing 71% of his passes. But you look at their remaining schedule, okay, and I feel like that out of all the premier Heisman front runners, if you will, they have the best chance of putting up monster numbers. And I just think he's got the easiest chance to do it if he stays healthy.
Bridgewater's not a bad pick. Not at all. I think with that pick, what concerns me is the schedule. I do feel like the Louisville, it's a favorable schedule, but the thing that's on the downside of that is, what are his signature wins going to be? I think that's the thing that hurts him the most.
Well, I mean, he had Saturday he had a key win against the Kentucky. Now, for their program, that's a big win, okay? But I still don't think that that's going to take away from the fact that he's probably going to throw for 4,000 or 5,000 yards this season, and he's probably going to have 40 to 50 touchdowns. I look for, if he keeps a level of play like he is against these, not so great opponents the rest of the year, he's probably not even going to have 10 picks.
Right now, we're Teddy Bridgewater's through 3 games. He's already thrown for over 1,000 yards. Over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. Here's what I was getting to. September 21, which is, of course, is next week, Florida International. They go to Temple. Rutgers comes to them. UCF comes to them. They go to South Florida. They go to UConn. Houston comes to them. Memphis comes to them. And then they go to Cincinnati. I'm not seeing any key wins there. I think, and gosh, you look at their schedule, it's not even inconceivable at all to think that Louisville might run the gauntlet with that, because they've got a pretty good football team, especially with Bridgewater at the helm. And you're right, he's going to have some ridiculous stats, so much so that he may not need a signature win if Louisville is capable of going undefeated. The guy that I got, the guy that I'm looking the most at is Taj Boyd. From what he did against Georgia. And we already have a win against Georgia. He's got South Carolina still on the schedule, and he's got Florida State still on the schedule. So those are 3 possible signature wins that Taj Boyd can put up. And the rest of his schedule, much like what you were making the point for Teddy Bridgewater, the rest of Taj Boyd's schedule isn't that tough. They don't have an overly tough schedule. You're talking about going to NC State. Wake Forest comes to them. They go to Syracuse. Boston College comes to them. Florida State comes to Clemson, comes to Death Valley. They go to Maryland, go to Virginia. Georgia Tech comes to Death Valley. Citadel comes to Death Valley. And I think the toughest game on their docket, at least what's remaining, is they have to go to Columbia to play South Carolina.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be like I say, big rivalry games like that. It's going to be tough for him. Taj Boyd is definitely not a bad pick at all. Him being a senior too, and don't forget the guy down in Tallahassee, Mr. Jameis Winston. If the guy, Manziel last year broke down the barrier, became the first freshman ever to win the Heisman. Okay, so now that barrier's been broken. Now it's pretty much open to anybody. Used to, it was reserved predominantly for juniors and seniors, mostly seniors. Tim Tebow came along, won it as an underclassman, as a sophomore. Then, now you have Manziel. Now it's wide open, in my opinion. It's wide open for anybody. So you got a guy like Jameis Winston who as far as I can tell, I don't think he's even had a ball touch the ground yet. Okay, all of his incompletions. He did have an interception yesterday, but all of his incompletions have been catches. They've just been out of bounds. And they haven't gotten into the meat of their schedule yet, so I'm really anxious to see what he does against a Clemson. They still have the Hurricanes coming on the schedule. And don't forget, the last game of the season, they got the Gators. By that time, I believe Florida will have somewhat of an identity. I do not look for them to beat the Seminoles, but it's a rivalry game. It's going to be tough. They're going to come to play that game.
Another guy that I think deserves a mention is Aaron Murray. The numbers that he put up against South Carolina, and again, his numbers against Clemson, they weren't bad. So, Murray against South Carolina, 4 touchdowns. Gosh, I think he was around 350, 400 yards of passing offense. I think Aaron Murray will get a good amount of consideration, especially because he's going to have the ability, once they get past the LSU game, to put up some really good numbers, and he'll have a balanced attack. So he won't have guys that will just play him back in coverage or blitz him all the time, because Todd Gurley's going to keep defensive coordinators honest. And one thing that Murray has in his pocket is he's got the South Carolina win for a possible signature win. So, LSU's coming up. I think that game will also kind of determine what Aaron Murray's Heisman eligibility is going to be.
Yeah, Aaron Murray is another one. I think he's going to be the sleeper out of all the Heisman front runners, unless he just comes out and just starts throwing for 500 yards a game. But I don't see that happening, because you got a Todd Gurley, Keith Marshall in the backfield. They're going to have a lot more of a balanced approach. But think about this. Part of my big argument with A.J. McCarron is his career achievements. Okay, he don't have any standout numbers yardage-wise or TD-wise. His efficiency numbers are off the charts. Aaron Murray, by the end of the season, will have the SEC record in touchdowns. Might have it for interceptions, but he's definitely going to have it for touchdowns and yardage. Okay, he's not going to have the wins, but he's, and that's impressive. I mean, I think they, being a 4-year starter like he is, I think that you almost don't have a choice but to be competing for those records if you're any good. And I think he's going to have all those records by the end of the season over Danny Warfel.
You mentioned A.J. McCarron just really quick. I want to touch on that. The guy's done nothing but win. He basically willed the Alabama offense yesterday to hold off A&M. What does a guy like A.J. McCarron have to do to get consideration?
In my opinion, I feel that McCarron, or only player not to win the Heisman, to possibly have 3 rings. Okay? He's already got 2 out of 3. He might win 3 out of 4 this year. And not have a Heisman Trophy. I mean, that would be somewhat crazy. But the guy doesn't put up, Alabama just don't, they have not had a flashy quarterback hardly ever, I think, since Joe Namath days. I mean, that was way before mine and your time, but they just don't have flashy quarterbacks that run their system because they're so run-first oriented. Ball control is what they believe in, and that's, when people say Bama being Bama, that's what it is.
Tired of spending an arm and a leg on office supplies? 3 words for you: Heron Document Systems. Heron Document Systems can offer the prices of the big box stores and give hometown customer support and service. Copiers, scanners, printers, toner, banners, you name it, Heron Document Systems can get it done. Give Keith and his staff a call to find out how much money they can save you. 912-267-7802, 912-267-7802, or online at heronds.com.
Jason's huge upset pick, which is really just a prayer.
What is up with? Are you serious? Boy, I tell you what, the production staff, you give them an inch, take a mile. Really? Circus music? All right, whatever. Well, Garrett, the pick that I'm taking, we're still playing the circus music. It didn't matter. They're not even listening to me.
They don't care.
They don't care. The game that I'm taking is I'm going to take Mississippi State next week to take down Notre Dame. I haven't been really impressed with Notre Dame. They didn't look very good Saturday night against Purdue. They had to rally there in the fourth quarter to give themselves a win, and they lost to Michigan, and then Michigan goes out and struggles with that. Yeah, I'm going to take Michigan State to beat Notre Dame. I think that's the pick I'm going with.
Garrett's monumental upset pick, which probably won't happen.
Well, the crazy circus pick I have this week, and don't laugh at me, Jason, too hard, okay? And it actually might not be too far from the truth, but I got Auburn over LSU in Baton Rouge at night.
Wow.
Get some. I think Auburn is they're definitely going to be up for that game. If they have it, they showed Saturday they have a decent rush defense against Mississippi State. And I believe if they can somewhat slow down that run of LSU and put it all on the arm of Zach Mettenberger, now, woo, that's big. Put it all on the arm of Zach Mettenberger, they got a chance.
Okay. All right. You know, we were talking about, you're talking about that big SEC game, an SEC team that got a big win. Ole Miss throttled Texas, 44-23.
I just knew that Texas playing at home would get it together. Much as I hate to say it, I think Mac Brown and staff is definitely on the hot seat. They haven't done anything really since the Colt McCoy days and Vince Young and Colt McCoy days. Okay, so lose a game at home against Ole Miss. What does that say, Jason? Does that say Texas is on the downturn, or does that say that Ole Miss might be on the upswing?
No, I think it's Texas on the downside. I really don't think Ole Miss is that good. Ole Miss scored the last 27 points of the game, so they won the game going away. It's not like it was close and then you know in the third or close in the fourth quarter, and then they had a couple of turnovers or whatever to put the game away. They scored the last 27 points of the game, which went all the way back to the end of the first half. They were down 23-14 right before the half. Kicked a field goal to go into halftime, make it 23-17. That's all she wrote.
Well, I'm gonna disagree with you there, Jason. I think it's Ole Miss is definitely on the upswing. Granted they're playing a struggling, to say the least, Texas Longhorns team. But I think Hugh Freeze has done a pretty good job of recruiting there in Ole Miss, and I think you're going to see more of that. And I think you're going to see more of Ole Miss being a contender, not just in the SEC West. I think against out-of-conference opponents just like that. They're going to win some games that people don't really think they have a chance in. So I think they're building a solid program there, and what can I say? I mean, they're putting out some pretty decent recruits, and they are building a program at Ole Miss.
To your point, not that I agree, but to your point, Ole Miss did land the number one high school recruit in this last year's recruiting class, and I think they ended up with the 8th best recruiting class in the country. So to your point, I see what you're saying. I still don't think that they're this year, maybe 2 years away, a year away. But yes, to your point, they definitely are on the upswing, no doubt about it. Another game that caught my attention, we mentioned it a few minutes ago, Akron, Michigan. Boy, I tell you what, Akron took them to the limit, didn't they?
I think they caught Michigan slipping, if you want to know the truth. When I was watching some of that game on Saturday, it reminded me of the Appalachian State Michigan game about 4 or 5 seasons ago. You know, where they lost it there late when Appalachian State blocked the field goal late to win the game. And I thought the same thing was going to happen Saturday, because Akron had them on the ropes, man. They had them on the rope. They had the game won. I think Akron lost it more than Michigan won it.
Akron had a chance right there at the end to score a late touchdown. There was a minute some odd to go to put themselves in front, and they couldn't convert. Devon Gardner, all the folks that were ready to anoint him the next Heisman Trophy winner, slow it down. Gardner did not play well. A QBR of barely over 66, a quarterback rating over 66, 3 picks on the day. So, maybe not as good as, really the Big Ten folks and the Michigan folks thought he was.
Well, to struggle against Akron, it is. Terry Bowden has taken over they're going to they're going to compete in some games that they probably shouldn't. Because of that, I believe Terry Bowden's a great coach. Michigan to struggle like they did with the superior athletes. Devon Gardner is definitely a great quarterback, but he's not at that level like I'll even say an A.J. McCarron. He don't put up the flashy numbers, but takes care of the football. Devon Gardner, he's got good legs. He's another Denard Robinson. He might not quite be, have the legs that Robinson had, but I have to agree with you there, Jason. They need to slow that Heisman talk down, because when he gets to play teams like Ohio State, and if he dismantles teams like that, then, only then do I want to hear anything about a Heisman talk.
Arizona State, Wisconsin. Wisconsin has been the premier team in the Big Ten last 4 or 5 seasons.
Agreed, yeah.
The last 4 or 5 seasons when Brett Bielema was there. And Arizona State has been a middle-of-the-pack Pac-12 team, pretty much.
Agreed.
And I don't think, as far as Arizona State goes, that there's any difference. They're still going to be a middle-of-the-pack Pac-12 team. Wisconsin got beat. Supposedly one of the premier Big Ten teams, one of the top echelon teams. They got beat 32 to 30. Granted, they were on the road; they had to go to the West Coast. But when you're the face of a conference, when you're the best team in the conference, and you have been for so long, that's not a game that you're supposed to lose.
No, and two problems: no Monty Ball, no Brett Bielema. Okay, and they didn't control the ball well Saturday, and so. I think the absence of Brett Bielema now at Arkansas, I think they're feeling some of that, Jason.
468 total yards of offense against a Big Ten defense. That's what Arizona State put up. And, of course, the Big Ten is defense, defense, defense. That's what we do. Well, you gave up 468 yards total to a middle-of-the-pack Pac-12 team. So, God forbid you play Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, they might set all kind of NCAA records with that one. They might actually have to put the brakes on to keep it under 1,000. Because you're right. I mean, Arizona State is not the premier team in the Pac-12, and it's clear. That was another point I was going to touch on. Was Wisconsin just don't have the. They don't have the. It appears they don't have the defense that they've had either. Mm-hmm. They used to somewhat be, last couple of years with Bielema at the helm, they were the most physical team, arguably, in the Big Ten.
Obviously, right now the best team in the Big Ten is Ohio State. You take number 20 Wisconsin goes down, and then number 11 Michigan struggles with an Akron, and almost gets taken down by Akron. Again, we talk about this time and time again, but I think there really is an issue going on in some of the conferences, some of the major the AQ conferences. Especially in the middle of their conference. Sure, you've got 1 or 2 teams toward the top of the conference, but there's no depth past them. And I think that is a growing trend in all of the other AQ conferences other than the SEC. You look at the Pac-12, Oregon, Stanford, what's below them? Not much. You go to the Big Ten, same deal. Ohio State, in the past Wisconsin, but what teams they have other than them that are consistent? None, not really. ACC, Florida State, and Clemson, same thing. So I think it's a trend that's growing across the country, and for whatever reason, the SEC is being able to escape that. Why? Recruiting.
If you look at some of the rosters in the SEC, they're getting players out of California, out of Texas. Of course, the SEC has branched out to Texas now with A&M being a member of the conference. But they're getting recruits from all over the country because the SEC is hands down by far the best football conference in the country, and everybody wants to come here because they have a chance to win a championship with any team that they get on. I have to say that even Vandy. I mean, come on now, got to give them some shout outs. I just think that the SEC is the football conference. Yeah. And everybody wants to play. Everybody wants to play in the SEC.
Garrett Gibbs, Jason Bishop. Be sure to check us out right here every week, the SouthernSportsEdition.com.